Right then, guys, let's get started. So I take it everyone can see the screen um, where we're actually showing off the technical meeting for 21st of July 2022. We have got in the background myself and you can also probably see Elma smiling away there. And I'll introduce you to Elma in due course. So yes, welcome to the technical meeting for the AACE. Um, Without much ado, let me just get started on with the agenda, as it were. So I will be reading a little bit off the slide. Um, the setting up the agenda, we actually here for a webinar on the integrated project cost management solutions. And I think those of you who actually know me know that this is one of my own particular areas of expertise, and it's not for the faint-hearted. And I think Elmo will um, give us a lot of input and insight as to what integrated project cost management solutions is all about. What we have also asked is that we actually reserve the questions until the end of the presentation, just so that we can actually collect them all together, and that there will be then opened up to a networking open mic session also at the end. Um, Obviously, as in terms of normal protocol for when we're doing online presentations, attendees will all be muted. Um, and if you do want to actually ask us a question, there is a little hand button there where you can actually raise your hand, and if it's appropriate, then Elmer will actually allow you to talk, or you can actually use the chat function and actually type your questions, and we'll actually respond to those questions as we get towards the end of the presentation. So we will make the webinar available on our AACE Australian section YouTube channel after the session. So yes, you are being recorded, as all of us are. We have also got a AACE Spotify channel. Being honest, I haven't actually ever been on that one, so I'm not too sure what that looks like. Um, I hate to hear what my South African accent sounds like on Spotify. A certificate of attendance will be distributed to only to the AACE members, and if you do require that for your CPDs and CEUs, then please send an email through to our info email address, and we will gladly provide you with those credits that are due to you. And then the details of future events is actually hosted on our aace.org.au website as shown there. A little bit about AACE for those who are not familiar. Um, and I'll say it with a lot of enthusiasm about the AACE because I've spoken to many people in high-ranking positions here in Australia, especially that in even in project controls, and they've never even heard of AACE, and that's actually quite alarming. So when we do make mention of it, a lot of people automatically think straight away that it is something to do with the American Association, and there is a bit of a history behind that. But essentially, the AACE formed in 1956, yes, in the US, but it is called the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering. It is committed to the constructive exchange of ideas between members. So that's exactly what we are doing here today, is exchanging ideas and sharing knowledge. And it's also about the development of technical guidance and quality education, which is something that Alma is very passionate about, and that'll be part of his introduction as such. And also, it's its recognition of subject matter experts. Believe it or not, we do have some subject matter experts here in Western Australia, and I dare say across the rest of Australia as well. So it's about recognizing those particular individuals at the appropriate times. Where are we actually situated? Well, we're actually right across the whole of Australia. We've got Lou that is sitting up there in Queensland. He's actually become our president, taking over from Paul Harris earlier on in the year. We have got Alberto sitting down here in New South Wales as the regional chair. Down at the bottom here, we've got Val Matthews. He's quite prominent on LinkedIn and also a valued member of the AACE. And you'll notice that there is a bunch of people that live down there in Victoria. I dare say Victoria/Melbourne is probably the place to be at the moment. That's where all these people are. We've also got Rohit sitting down there looking after South Australia. And then you have myself representing WA and Northern Territory. That's not to say that I've ever been to Northern Territory, but I do actually represent them at the moment as such. We are obviously a not-for-profit organisation, and a lot of the time we're out there looking for people to come in and actually help us along. So at the moment we're out there looking for events coordinator, a membership secretary, and publications coordinator. So if there is any interest in becoming part of the committee, give me a bell and we'll hook you up with the right people then. So getting on to the actual presentation today is we have got Elmer. As I said, he's smiling away in the background there. I'm not going to try to pronounce his surname because that there is, it probably is Dutch, but I can think maybe German in there somewhere along the line. I'm not too sure. But we are talking about integrated project cost management solutions. And, you know, this webinar is about highlighting the harmony between people, process, and systems. And I think you're, especially here in WA, I've seen this people, process, systems put out in many companies that I actually go into. It's amazing, though, that there are a lot of companies out there that actually put people, systems, processes, where they actually get the last two the other way around, and that there can lead to some strange situations, as it were, where you're trying to change processes to fit in with your system, and that doesn't go down very well. And it, you know, I'm here to outline the root causes of common integration issues and how we can actually, or how Elmer will actually present possible solutions. So again, just a little bit more about Elmer. He's been kind enough to provide me with an outline of himself here. So Elmer is a certified cost engineer. So he has actually got his CCE and his CCP. He holds a MSc in applied physics. So I think he puts that puts him right up at the top of the Christmas tree in my books anyway. He actually provides consultancy services to major companies, and Elmer now leads the Cost Engineering Academy. So for a lot of people, they probably don't really recognize the name cost engineering being associated with the Cleopatra. So I know that they actually interchange between the two, but Cleopatra is actually owned by cost engineering. He applies his broad experience and enthusiasm to provide traineeships, develop courses, and organize workshops in the field of cost engineering. He is also a teacher at the Delft University of Technology and the Dutch Association of Cost Engineers, and is a frequent speaker at industry events. Elmer has provided consulting services in process assessment, development, and implementation to major multinational companies such as Shell, Unilever, Bayer, Cargill, Fleur, McDermott, Boskalis, Heineken, and Yara. And I might even also add that I know that they've actually got Cleopatra in quite a few installations here in Australia and also here in Western Australia as well. So without much ado, I'd like to actually hand over to yourself, Alma, and you can give us the lowdown on project controlled integration.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction. I couldn't have done better myself. Let me take a moment here and put my presentation on screen. So here we go. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm streaming here from the Netherlands and so pretty much the other part of the world to talk about the integrated project cost management solutions that we work with, that we offer, and talk a bit about the challenges and solutions that we see along the way. Also down below, you already see a couple of logos. The company I'm from is called Cost Engineering Consultancy. I think that's a handy name in this field. But also, yeah, we also build and supply the software solution Cleopatra. And we'll touch upon that here and there, how that fits in, basically also, and it's an integrated project cost management solution. And myself, I'm heading the Cost Engineering Academy. So a couple of important elements are already on the screen. And Ellen already did a very good job, again, about well, introducing me. You see a short summary here so that we also have it on screen. And indeed, I'm really passionate about also lecturing these topics to get people educated about cost management. And if you think about it, if you develop projects, you're maybe an engineer or you're tasked to execute a project as project manager, you don't really get educated, I guess, on cost engineering, cost management on school. What even is cost engineering? What is that? So what we try to do is really educate people in the field and what it means to get people aware of costs and the importance and how that influences project success. So in that context, I'm an approved education provider for the AACE. We give courses about the field to make you a certified cost technician and professional. I'm lecturer at the Delft University of Technology, where I have a course about economic evaluations. It's really the front end of projects to make engineers aware before they, dive into their careers and develop projects. And yeah, teacher at the Association of Cost Engineers, basically the more local AACE, if you will. And they'll recognize each other. And also very active organization, also giving courses and hosting events. And down below you see some of my experience in consulting services, also including preparing and validating estimates, doing cost control, project control, risk sessions, basically the whole spectrum which you encounter as you are supporting basically the project manager with total cost management services. Well, let's move on. The company behind me is called Cost Engineering Consultancy, and we're now with more than 115 people, I believe. Lots of cost engineers working in the field, giving a helping hand to our clients. And we're operating worldwide, providing the software solution, Cleopatra worldwide, and also the academy services that I'm responsible for. In the end, we're trying to empower organizations to really improve their project turnaround and maintenance organization performance. And our vision here is already very integrated way of looking at projects. You see an overview which we always like to present what you do when you move throughout your project from beginning to end. You at the beginning you scope, you define what you need to know, you set your targets, you maybe put some costs on there, get an estimate. At some point, especially when you start focusing on big turnarounds and maintenance events, you really want to in detail work out your work packs, set up your schedule. We get building information management in there these days. And then on the left-hand side, you see where you go from your contract setup towards execution management, elements like cost control or value management or project cost management, all the way up to data analysis. And then closing the loop for your next project cost estimate. And some of these elements will occur in today's presentation, but our company does so much more, as you will see on this picture. And in the center, I should note, we have the logo of our software solution, because the processes, the people still need to have a place to work. And we try to provide that with our online cloud solution, Cleopatra. So our company is focused around Cleopatra, also extensive cost data. And you cannot make a good estimate without having cost data. We developed this for clients together with them, and we have our own databases. And with all the projects that we do, and myself including, we provide courses from our academy and consultancy services. And as a final introduction slide to give you an overview of where we're active and what kind of industries. Basically, if you think about it, any industry that has something to do with like technical projects, executing scope, is dealing with similar issues around estimating, cost control, change management, executing projects. So we encounter this in oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, food, but also a lot of renewable projects now coming up with their own challenges. And it's just an outtake basically of the sort of clients that we serve. All right, so let's go to today's presentation. First, a quick overview to sketch the landscape and how we're controlling projects these days. And then we move towards looking at the root causes of many overruns and delays that at least that we observed so far. And then we need to think about designing an integrated project control process, because as you will see, it's a great way of having people work together later on and tie services in there and like software solutions. But those processes need to be there in the first place. So we'll need to talk about it. And actually, the AACE has a lot of great recommended practices around those. So I will want to refer to those. But then we talk about bottlenecks, which may prevent us or at least make it more difficult to get there. It's not just systems, but also people we need to work with. So we'll talk about that. In the end, to emphasize there, to close the loop, we need project benchmarking to gather information, close the loop. And then we'll wrap up and we'll have some time for questions. At least I'll do my best. If we cannot answer all of them, we'll of course try to collect them, get back to you later, or we can always connect afterwards. All right. So what I'd like to achieve here in this talk is to see why it's important in the first place to get a project control setup or a project cost management solution in an integrated manner instead of a collection of individual disciplines, from engineering to estimating to scheduling to project management. And what are the pitfalls, how to avoid them, and how can you then really integrate project control? So I'd like to make a bit more technical there and show you some examples of also how we do it. And then that would lead to improved investment decision-making strategies and actually following up on that. All right, so first, how we're controlling projects these days anyway. If you look at some studies, and you can, basically the funny thing is you can look up studies from now, from 10 years ago, from like 50 years ago. People are making the same mistakes. People are, if they do a closeout, they at least learn the mistakes they're going to do next time. But anyway, what are the kind of challenges people run into? Well, a lot of projects actually face cost overruns. And the issue is the bigger the projects get, actually, the more prone you are to cost overruns. And they get more complex, more stakeholders, so many more things that can go wrong, and right, but also can go wrong. So big chunk of projects face cost overruns, schedule delays, or in general, overrunning the budget and the plan and the baseline. And this can be a lot of money, right? If you would plot it to look at, for instance, the kind of schedule delay in months that you're looking at here. So delay with respect to the original schedule. That's also, again, a scatter of so many different data points you can look at, and many projects actually overrun. So that's a major issue. And there's many causes. We can only fix this if we know the cause of this. Otherwise, it's just quoting numbers and making fancy charts. But until that, we're just leaking money, as you can see in the picture here. So before I dive in, maybe a nice look at this one. It's a quick comic here for you of this guy called Dilbert. Give you a moment. I find it astounding how, I don't know who the creator is, I think it's Sander, yeah, Scott Adams, how much he knows about projects. You can find a lot of these on the internet. I really recommend it. I always like to throw them in, but this is real life. So how do we deal with this? How can we make projects successful? So let's look at some of the root causes of overruns and delays. I think this is a great overview here for you also to think, and maybe think while I'm going over this slide, think of your recent projects, see if you can maybe already identify some of these. Let's take a look. So on the top left, inadequate communication and the slow decision making. It's often misinterpretation, misexpectations, or ambiguous contract terms that lead to miscommunication. You have different stages in your project lifecycle, people with different backgrounds, different stakeholders. And each time someone talks to the other or sends an email or hands out some documentation, there's a communication happening, and that's an interface. And that's a perfect opportunity for making mistakes, misinterpreting something, or even just simple things as language barriers. So that's a major aspect of good project management, to get good communication going. Really, really vital. Like I mentioned, ambiguous contract terms or lack of incentives to control costs in the first place. You need this cost awareness, clear targets to control. And the top right, poor risk identification, risk management and response strategies. Of course, major cause of overrun is not identifying all your risk properly. And by risk, I don't just mean your top 10 events like weather downtime, shipment delays, but I also really mean here the systemic risks, right? The quality and maturity of the project team, and the type of and level of technology that you work with, the experience of the cost engineer that's on the project, if any, right? So it's also the people, right, that actually have to be identified, and what is that risk? In an early project stage, actually a big chunk of all the risk in the first place is this organizational risks, the internal risks. So we need to properly identify them. Otherwise, we're already like 0-1 behind in our score of trying to get a successful project. And in the middle section in orange, some of the elements that I really like to touch on in this talk. Insufficient planning and inaccurate estimating. It's, of course, a way to overrun your budget when the numbers you're working with are incorrect or not accurate enough in the first place. Right? Now, poor project controls in general, so cost and schedule control. Misalignment of departments and software systems. But it's really also, again, the integration but communication element in there. And we'll talk about this extensively in a moment. And in the bottom, certainly important design errors and omissions, and leading to scope growth. The scope keeps creeping up. If the design is not fixed on time, it's being changed too late. You miss out on proper good value engineering up front. You have a lot of late changes, etc. And that leads to, of course, overruns. And ineffective project governance, management oversight is important. And last but not least, late design and poor project definition in the first place. So that's a lot of causes. Each of them should lead to a proper defined process. Also then people getting onboarded and trained on that, right? Getting trained, but also learn from each other what people need to do. You're not working by yourself, but you need to understand from the people you're working with, your stakeholders, people delivering you their input. You need to be able to understand that to work as a team. But I think many of these could be tackled by at least starting to work together a bit better. So let's talk about that. How do you integrate those kind of processes? And I'd like to show you a great example, a way of working, way of setting up processes. That's the PDCA, or the Deming cycle: plan, do, check, assess. And I think any good business process has to be based on this. It has to be able to at least smash down, be simplified into this order, where you first plan, you plan your work, you plan your activities. This goes for like risk management, asset management, planning your estimating efforts, planning for value engineering. It's if you think about it, many processes are like this. You first plan, then you do. So you execute your task. And as you're doing that, you check, you measure the performance. But to do this, it's not like, oh, we're doing great. No, you need to be able to have it measurable. So that's why you have a good plan. including setting the benchmark, setting your goals, your targets. So you're checking, and then you're looking at the deltas. You're assessing, you're evaluating, and based on that, you're actively steering. You're steering your project, you're steering your process, so that you can adjust the plan. So it's a continuous process. And then you can work this out in great detail, if you will, for the various different processes that you have in the company. Let's look at an, I think, great example. I've taken this from the AACE Total Cost Management Framework. It's a great piece of literature that if you're not familiar with it, I can really recommend it. Actually, it's like a must-have book on your shelf. It's great. And we use it a lot when we assess processes of companies to have a reference, basically. And this is an overview picture, and each of these boxes are worked out in the various chapters, and you see a number, reference number there. So this is just an overview. But let's take a quick look here. On the top left, you see project historical database management. So that's already one. That's a challenge in itself. You have to maintain a good database of your past projects, of your asset information, your cost data, template work packs, template schedules. And with that information, you're able to understand your business, how it operates, how the various businesses, how they do. And from there, you set up strategic asset management process, which involves setting the targets. What do you expect of your assets? Simple things, like the return on asset is an important one, or return on equity, see how you're funding it. But from there, you're trying to define in much more detail, so technical, how you want your assets to operate. And based on that, you identify the need for maybe an investment, an adjustment, basically a project, an extension to comply with government regulations and whatnot. So you set up a project scope and execution strategy. So now we're in the blue section here. And then from there, we basically have a couple of iterative processes before we actually even just go execute that project. And we develop our schedule and our plan. And so we figure out in the front end of the project what we need to do in the first place. We keep track of the costs to keep on having a realistic business case, make the right decisions based on the right budget, assign resources, and when we need to buy them, from where, and we plan them for our procurement. And just a couple of example major processes that take place. And each one of those, again, is a plan, do, check, assess, cycle approach. And on the bottom, you see a couple of evaluation processes where it takes place. On the front end, when you're developing a project, you're doing value analysis and value engineering to optimize the design, perhaps for cost, often for cost, but maybe also for its supply chain, its manufacturability. Maybe optimize it for risk, or these days, right, for the availability of materials in the first place. It may mean that you need to look at, okay, where can we get still some steel or some major commodities? Oh, there's a batch available in China. Okay, what kind of profile? You need to make some adjustments. It's challenging right in the first place. And then keep track of your economics here these days. Also, costs of goods, costs of containers are increasing rapidly. Shortage of resources. So you're keeping track of that and assess your risks. And then based on all that, you define what's basically the right budget, what's the right plan, the best scope, and then you're going to execute it in the right way, right? And that's total cost management. And that's where project controls come in. So you set up your project control plan, how are you going to control this? And then from there, you control the baseline by looking at schedule, cost performance, scope, etc. And that's a continuous process once again. Now, when that project, when it's running, you do project performance, and then based on that, you forecast and apply change management. And again, continuous improvement here happening until that project is done. And then you look at your assets, what you ended up with. You see, hey, is it now operating better, or did I achieve my goals? Maybe am I more profitable now or not? And then based on that, you again maybe develop a project and do that project, and it goes on like that, right? So this is what we like to call total cost management. You see, each of these again is a process, people working there, and of course systems may support it, but you need to get the process right in the first place. Get your people understanding it to work like this. So you cannot do this just on your island. It's a really integrated business if you look at this. This is how you run the company. So that's quite a challenge if you think about it. So let's now zoom in, look at some of these processes and see then how that works. Now we have a couple of things we need to take into account. When we integrate something, we have a couple of hurdles to overcome. But let's see, in the end, when we try to do this, when we achieve to do this, you can look at the kind of benefits you can have. So what I'm trying to say here is basically you may go home after this presentation, you say, hey, we need to do this. Then your boss will ask, right, so what does it cost me? What's my return? Like we always do. So when I integrate something, what do I get out of it? Right, well, in the first place, when you get more competitive products, more competitive budgets, quicker time to market, those are obvious advantages. But more in general, when you integrate processes and you actually advance and enhance the basically the productivity and basically the availability of data. So the matter of basically cross integration as you go up leads to more and more successful projects, basically. Having data available, connecting processes together, actually enforces standards already. So there's a really great way of getting started. And you see a couple of images here that show you as you integrate more and more the part of projects that leads to success if you look at the market. So this process, what's the idea? For one, we set up a transparent cost baseline, which meets the stakeholder requirements. So it is reflecting the targets, the scope very clearly to start with. And from there, we monitor project cost and we look at our plan and we control our schedule during execution. And we visualize the performance of our project by indicators. And that's where we go into project controls. And this is not just accounting, keeping track of the numbers, counting the beans, but it's also really providing the means to control. So really earned value management is a key aspect. We provide improved forecasting information, then we integrate things, you'll see. And in the end, we need to collect data, and not just all data, because it leads to bureaucracy, basically. We're trying to perform some kind of big data analysis to learn from all the projects and the businesses that run inside the company to achieve meaningful ratios, metrics, and cost data. And that's what we're going to collect. That's what we're benchmarking to learn for and make our next project more predictable. So let's see. The process that you saw from the AACE, the total cost management process. This part here is basically one of those blue boxes where we look at then executing a project. Zooming into that little box, executing the project, doing project control, could look like this. There's again processes, but now worked out in a bit more detail. What typically happens is if you start working on your project, in the industry, and you start with an engineering design. It's on the left in green, and the output towards the estimator is basically an equipment list, material takeoff, or bill of quantity, basically technical input with attributes and quantities. And this leads to a cost estimate by pulling information from all sorts of knowledge bases, intelligent cost databases, and from getting your time-driven cost in. It's on the bottom. And costs are time-driven, but also vice versa. What we are estimating here needs to be reflected in the schedule, in the end in the work packs. There's already you see some interface we have between often different people, different buckets, different islands, and different information. So we need to try to align this information so that in the end, sure, we can put it in a system, in a program, but we need to get the processes right, the structure. So we'll talk about that in a moment when I, again, want to zoom in on some of those arrows. But first, let's see what else we have. So when we go at some point and agree on our budget, we fix the estimate and schedule into a baseline for control. We send those two, the estimate and the schedule, towards a cost control process. And in there, we're going to do change management, forecasting, collecting purchase orders, contract values. You see a couple of errors here from like time reporting, people write their hours. We get commitments actuals from our ERP system. We get progress from the field or not. And all this leads to keeping track of what's happening on the project and leading to measuring project performance. Now, a quick example of what's happening, you see, so it's not just a one-way, well, at least not a one-time arrow here. You see, when the project's running, we still need to make quick estimate, do annual cost studies, reforecast, estimate the impact of changes. So we need access to our estimation process, our estimation data, our knowledge, when we want to do good cost control. To be able to understand how much contingency I have, I need to have access to, or at least understand the baseline. What's that amount of contingency based on? What assumptions? Because it can easily be wishful thinking or be a standard percentage, or is it really part of an elaborate risk process assessment? Right, so that's an example here where we really need to have the good connection. That's what leads to things like a base of estimate. Also, or I should say, a great recommended practice from the AACE, how to capture your estimate well so that the next person is able to understand what's in it, right? And then what we learn here during the project, we capture that by benchmarking, like quotations, all sorts of price data, typical quantities, metrics, and we capture that in what we call knowledge bases for reusing in the next project, right? So it's a continuous improvement cycle which goes on there. Once again, each step here, each arrow is again a process. You see now how many processes there are, and often each box itself, once again, is at least one different person, maybe even multiple. So all these people need to be able to talk to each other. So how do you do that? Going one step deeper, let's look at that arrow from the engineering design towards the estimate. The engineer will deliver you, for instance, an equipment list like this one, where you see various process equipment like a distillation column, a feed tank, and whatnot, with some attributes and technical attributes. From this, the estimator will need to make an estimate, especially in the early stages. That may be the only thing you have. So you use all sorts of methods like the hand factor method, length factor method, and whatnot to set up a project estimate. And we do that as cost engineers. And that's where I love to say that where basically cost meets engineering, to engineer the costs. At this stage, you don't know maybe a lot about the equipment. Maybe you need to even derive some technical attributes yourself. Calculate wall thickness to determine the amount of steel, right? Determine the surface area, or based on temperature, make an assumption for the amount of insulation you have. And so those kind of engineering relations we also do when we make estimates. And we capture that in these kind of systems to capture that process, capture that knowledge in the end in a tool. So that you don't need to do that in an Excel or a piece of paper. So you go from a equipment list towards an estimate. And then when the engineer makes an update, you would basically process that right away and then see the cost impact. And that leads to, for instance, in Cleopatra Enterprise, leads basically to an estimate like this, where you see the distillation column listed with all sorts of typical materials and labor efforts, in this case, based on the hand factor method. In case you're not familiar, once again, the AACE has a great repository of information in there, or what's also part of this, getting educated. Go to class, learn about methods to go from equipment list to estimates. But that's also what's done here. And then from there, we need to go structure the estimate. And we collect cost data, but now we need to think ahead and say, hey, wait a second, the scheduler will want something from this, right? The controller will want to work with this. Then we need to start procure things. So we need to be able to put contracts in, compare commitments, purchase orders to what we have estimated. So in short, we need structures. We like to call them breakdown structures. You may be familiar with things like the work breakdown structure or a cost breakdown structure. And this is the one that we always like to use, at least, is the cost breakdown structure like you see here, which is a split into materials and construction on one end and contracts for labor on the other hand, indirect costs, etc., which is also great for benchmarking and later on determining like hand and length factors. Versus now, let's say a work breakdown or an area breakdown or a contract breakdown. And if you do this already in the estimate, then later on you make it much easier for a controller to use that. So basically what you're doing here, if you smash it down, make it simple, is you're making a responsibility assignment matrix. Where you look at the cross-section of a work breakdown, organizational breakdown, and a cost breakdown. And this leads to work packs, basically. Can be high level, can be super detailed for contractors. Each basically having costs and hours and quantities assigned to them. So like if this would be a quick estimate, installing a valve, in a certain location, which can be scheduled, done by a certain contractor, which can be contracted out as work back, and it has certain costs in there. So in this case, pipes and valves and whatnot. So you see, this is a great output then towards other people having to use this information, so that we can spend our time on what we really want instead of basically manual downloading or writing down cost information or collecting all this. It's already standardized. I want to have this in my cost data. It has to be in the estimate so that I can, as a controller, then spend all my time on actually forecasting, doing change management, and controlling my cost, and not on restructuring, organizing all that cost data, but I want to have that properly handed over. So I can spend all the time on what I think has to matter most. So what does that look like then? Well, we need to integrate cost control and estimating, basically by, if you just look at this here, by grabbing that estimate, which may have 100,000 of lines, right, of pipes and cables and bolts and gaskets, and we're going to roll that up into a higher level of our breakdown structures, basically, like what you see here. Quick example, you see here a cost breakdown of pipe materials, and each bucket here basically collects information from down below in the estimate. Because as a controller, I typically at a little bit higher level, I control my project, but I always want to be able to open that up, look what's inside, compared to my purchase order, compared to progress in the field, and get an idea of what's going on. So this link's vital. So standardizing structures is a major business process, basically. Way before you can roll out systems, like I guess like ClickPatch, right? We have to get these processes and structures in place. That's like almost like a prerequisite. So a good work breakdown, a good cost breakdown are a great starting place. But also we need to link it to the schedule to get the time element in there. So looking here at the schedule, for example, some quick bar chart with maybe a network schedule in the background. Then each bar here represents, again, part of the estimate. Could be one-on-one, could be a collection. So it means that my estimate needs to be structured in terms of the WBS. Also the same one that the scheduler set up. It's often that I see that if you're working with a WBS and that you talk to the scheduler near the coffee machine, you drop the word WBS and they're like, huh? Oh, you also use that? Oh, we need to talk. Yeah, we need to talk, right? It's a project team effort up front to decide how you execute your project, among which is how you're going to structure it, right? And this is the link between those islands of people. So again here, the estimator, the scheduler work together to combine the budget and the schedule so that you get a time-phased baseline. And then during execution, we need to link with the ERP system, like SAP or Navision or JD Edwards, you know. And there, what you like to do is integrate, for instance, a bunch of your actuals, your commitments, your budget with that ERP system so that you can read in basically financial information. That's nice, that's magic, that's the software, that works. The thing is, you need to actually have that process in place. I don't want a controller who is just fixing mistakes all the time because they bought this fancy system, but everyone's misusing it. No. We need to get up front, define pretty well how the cost data is to be entered, what kind of attributes, what level of detail, like what currency exchange rate lists, what are we going to use. So we need to find a way how to link information in ERP and the status of that information with what's in my baseline budget. So think of, we have purchase requisitions, which get transformed into an actual purchase order, which then get executed, you get invoiced against it, then you're sent the invoice. Different statuses of all sort of information, which is all referring to one piece of the scope. But again, it's a different person that's delivering it with different interests, with different resolution of information if you're unlucky, which is often the case anyway. So we need to try to find a way of linking bunches of purchase orders with parts, elements of the baseline. So that's, again, a process which you need to agree on. Now, if you get this correctly done, and that's not a trivial effort, but when that's done, so estimate linked to schedule, those two coming together into a baseline, managing, for instance, your ERP system, your progress system, your time writing systems, all to be linkable, then we can work on what we call earned value management. So we're monitoring performance. I'm not here to give class about this, but we really have courses about this because first you need to know what you're doing before you even want to set up processes. So again, giving courses is really important here, I guess. But when you get this figured out, you have those processes and the systems, then you can do these things in the end. You can visualize what's going on with these kind of S-curves. And so you're looking at now at the baseline function of time, from left to right function of time. In blue, we have the earned value, and so what we have performed, the budgeted cost of what we have actually executed versus what we are supposed to have been spending for what we did. And then you can draw some preliminary conclusions from just looking at these graphs. And right now we're looking at the earned and the expenditures being sure on top, but we're really lagging. And this would be a reason to know which direction you need to dive into and investigate the project so that we can set up a forecast or have multiple forecasts, if you will. So getting the process in place can lead to performance monitoring. That's what we really want. So we work then on dashboards to visualize this as much as possible. That's what really earned value is about. Earned value management is not just crunching data, but visualizing it so that you can do project management, effective steering. Then we're collecting this information from month to month, from report to report. We capture our project estimates, we capture our schedules across our projects, etc., which all leads to a lot of data. And people like to use the word big data. To be a bit careful there. That can also mean a large amount of unsorted, uncategorized data, but we need to bring structure to this. And so we're normalizing it, making it comparable, indexing it to bring it to today's price level, looking at locational impacts so that we can make cost comparable and reuse it for next projects, or compare our current performance with historical projects to say what's going to happen to make a good forecast. And we can do portfolio management, look across your projects and do better portfolio and project management based on what you see happening. Right? So, and system and tools support you, but having those processes in place really enables you to do this. You see an example here, by the way, of a pie chart, of a benchmark of, I think this is our turnaround projects. You see again, typical key amounts of contribution of various disciplines, which have been recorded and are great for future turnarounds to be estimated. So in the end, you work with basically portfolio overviews or program views, where if you have multiple projects often tied together, or sister plants or utilities running other plants, that you have them connected into an overview, so that in the end you can look at how your projects are performing. But that's the final point. But again, still a fool with the tool is still a fool. But still the means are there. The software is there. We need to make sure we have all those prerequisites there before we can successfully use those integrated tools. And this again, then will lead to a kind of integrated feedback loop, like you see here. This is the one I also started with, but now perhaps you see a bit more clearly how and why we do it like this. And so from project inception to project execution and closeout, we close the loop now with these integrated processes. So when we arrive, we want to help scoping, estimating, integrated with our planning departments, getting the engineers involved, visualizing it in BIM methods, getting the time elements, setting a good baseline, etc., all the way out to data analysis and closeout. So if we're concluding here, you see the very first slide showed you there's a lot of overruns and people are still making the same mistakes. There's a long way to go. Now, modern systems at least help us taking away a lot of those challenges regarding software, like simple tools from the dinosaur age, like Excel or even just paper. We can get that out of the equation, but we still have people left. So what do we do with people? We train them. We try to integrate them, set up good processes so that they can work with those tools. So things like disciplines treat like individual silos, different departments responsible for their own shop, no standardized breakdown structures, issues in recasting it into the proper baseline, no consistent closeout is an issue. In general, the human factor, untrained, maybe naive or having a bias. and alignment between tools. Those are things that I touched on. Here you see them once again in a list. I think each of these you already have a lot of fun, I think, addressing. You spend a lot of time there. But again, finding the root cause of issues is your path to success. So that if you manage to integrate, you should be able to get more accurate and reliable early phase estimates, and to better understand the technical scope, to better get the schedule in, to make better decisions and be more competitive. Focus your time on analysis instead of gathering and throwing information across the fence full of mistakes and unclear things. And focus your time not on data, putting data in, but on analyzing it. And then you can increase your profitability by more effectively managing overruns and getting your processes improved. And then by benchmarking, you can learn from your mistakes. You can keep on improving, setting the targets, improve on it, beat that P50 baseline, and get a successful project. Now you see, and this is where I really need to wrap up. I've been talking now for like 40 minutes, but you see, there's so much more to say about every of these separate items. You can keep on digging, and that's also what we do in our academy courses. Even just estimating, we can dig in for like 5 days, scheduling for days, cost control for days. So I really invite you to join one of our courses, or actually I should say any event, session, or course that you can, because you need to get educated, learn about it, try it, do it. You have to stay active in the field to be able to tackle these and keep on improving. All right, so I think that's where I want to wrap up with a quote. Always works when you throw familiar faces on screen, I guess. But it's a good one. And people who resist change will be confronted by the growing number of people who see that better ways are available. And technology is really helping us here. But again, don't forget that you have to have the processes and the people in place and to use that technology. All right. So that's it from my end. I'd like to thank you a lot. And please, if you'd like to learn more about it or contact us, you're welcome to do it via any of our channels and our website, costmanagement.eu. But I think looking at the time, we should wrap up the presentation here, Alan, and go see if we have questions and see how we can go around that. All right?
Yes, thanks very much, Elmer. Certainly a intriguing presentation. I know for many of us, it actually is familiar. We hear a lot about the integration. I dare say, though, that whilst us as in the engineering levels understand what could be achieved, what can be achieved, my own experience would suggest that it's those that are in the management positions, those higher up above us, just somehow don't. I don't know whether it's a case of that they don't understand it, or whether they just don't believe that it is possible.
Yeah, they're so far away from products to actually see what's needed. And even people that are like old-fashioned gurus from the field, they're now in their office in the ivory towers. That's sometimes tough. So what I really always like to see is that managers also join courses. And what works best for managers is not like a 5-day course, but a quick workshop, an awareness, a case study. So I see that works really well. So on one end, you need to convince, of course, that people actually have to do estimating, have to do scheduling control. But yes, it's equally as so. It's a management team, and that's sometimes a challenge. So yeah, creating awareness. But it's on the other hand, you see now in today's economy of shrinking margins, right? Shortage of supplies of people. People are looking for means and tools. They're looking around. How can we do this? So as cost engineers and controllers, we need to shout up upstairs like, hey, there are means, there's processes. So stand up for yourself, and we need to keep trying and make people aware of our field. Because if I may say one thing here, often managers don't even see it as a profession. They say, oh, cost engineering, or especially if you dive down, estimating. Oh, why can't the secretary do that? Oh, cost control, the project manager can do that, right? For our $1 billion project, just ask a project manager for an invoice or two if you want. That's cost control. So just awareness of that it's a profession in the first place, that's a challenge. Yeah. So send your managers to these kind of events, to these kind of presentations. Yeah. I think that also, also answers the one of the questions that also posted, I see.
Yeah, that was actually my own question there. I put up there.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah. And so also for the others, please feel free to ask your questions, but also to contact me or any of my colleagues, Alan, after the presentation. We'll be sure, right, to post links to be able to contact us, because there's so much more to talk about. This is basically the tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Perhaps I could ask another question, Elmer. Do you find that integration of all of these systems happened at the larger corporate companies, or do you believe it actually happened at the mid-tier and lower companies?
You see that there's big ideas at the major companies. They have a big bag of money, of course. So we do see some larger also software endeavors, you can almost call them. Sometimes going a bit too far, doing everything at once. Also for the smaller companies, it's very relevant. It's maybe even easier also to implement. If you have 1 or 2 people, it's a quick and easy step to get some processes aligned, because you don't need to go through a elaborate set of people. So at major companies, I see it takes actually longer, maybe more money to in the end get a beautiful process, but it takes a lot of time. A lot of people need to go look in the right direction and then actually follow up on the process. By the way, don't forget to design it, but actually follow up on it. And there can be a major side job of the controller, for example, during execution, to actually enter out for all those project people to actually follow up on structuring and the processes. So bigger company, maybe more money, but does it make it automatically better? Yeah. Right.
Anyone else got any questions before we wrap it up for tonight? Okay.
Right.
Elmer, thank